Hello,
Hello.
hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to see you again. How are you?
So far so good.
That's good.
Uh, let's start to conversation about the plan to improve my English language. I want to ask you about. I have lots of so many vocabularies, but unfortunately
Mhm.
I cannot use it. You know, I live in Iraq, and so many
Mhm.
people speak Arabic, not speak
Mhm.
English. I want to give me some tricky plane, fast plane to improve my English language immediately and fast.
Okay. Um, a lot of it mainly depends on the effort and that you put into learning, but
Mm.
also on whatever it is that you do best when it comes to learning. Are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? Do you learn by acting out what you're learning? That is also a big factor in how you'll be able to learn. So that's going to be a big part of how you would be able to learn quickly, but successfully.
Yes.
So,
Uh, yes, go ahead.
so what style of learning do you feel that you benefit from the most?
I like a practice style to speak with people. Sometimes to speak. I think speaking is fast way to learn because the practice, because you have to
Mhm.
force your brain to bring the so many vocabularies and sentences, phrases.
Okay. So I mean that can definitely be the case of where speaking can
Mm,
be beneficial. If you're trying to do you like the all around understanding of English and improving all parts of English, sometimes focusing just solely on speaking isn't necessarily the best way to do it. Just because in speaking, sometimes it can be hard to figure out what parts of grammar that you need to use. Just because, like, for example, punctuation. Sometimes sentence structure isn't always so obvious too. So sometimes focusing more on speaking, if you're wanting to practice overall English, can be a little bit complicated because you're
mm.
not actually seeing the process of like the sentences or grammar being used. It's only vocal.
Okay, let me ask you about the which things should I learn, English or grammar, or grammar and English together?
I mean, grammar and English together is important because grammar is a huge part of English. So knowing
I,
grammar, even
that's
if it means just basic English or grammar,
uh,
it's really important.
grammar correct the language.
I mean, it makes it whatever you're saying more accurate because if you don't use grammar in conversation, your conversation can mean something entirely different compared to what you're trying to say.
Yes. What about
Mhm.
the slang language, formal or slang language, or learn together?
Um, People speak both, so formal
Mm,
and slang. However,
mm,
slang is going to be different wherever you are. So slang is going to vary per part of wherever you're at. So of course, slang for British English is going to be different than slang in different
mm.
parts of the United States or Canada. Everywhere
But
has different
sometimes
slang.
it's same. I have American and let me show you about this dictionaries. Actually, I support the British language, right?
Hmm.
But I have two dictionaries,
Hmm.
Oxford dictionaries,
Hmm. Yep, the
Oxford
Oxford, I see it.
dictionary, yes, and American Oxford dictionaries.
Hmm.
But when I look for about the words in the same uh, British or American, I see the same thing or same definition.
Yeah, and there
Okay,
might be some
so,
similarities.
sometimes is to be different, but sometimes it's same word, same definition, same description for that something.
Yeah, and there might be times where there are some words that are similar or the same, but there are a lot of differences in slang when it comes to wherever you're at because they might be used differently. Because even in the
Mm,
dictionaries aren't necessarily part of the culture. So that could be someone's
mm.
point of view, not the actual usage of the word itself in conversation.
Okay. What about the movies? Do you think movie it's useful for me to help me with the uh, slang phrases, slang sentences, or uh, to motivate me to speak English fluently, or no?
I think it can be. Movies are always recommended, movies and TV shows. They're also great recommendations if you're wanting to improve not only your
Mm,
speaking, but also your listening skills. Because, more updated TV shows and movies are generally realistic when they have conversations in the pacing. So if you're listening to pacing and conversations, it's going to be very similar to what you would normally hear in conversations, in the US or in an English speaking country. So if you're wanting to practice speaking in conversation at the pace that the speakers are using, you can always do mimicry. That's always a suggestion.
What
So you
about the
could,
okay? What about the mimicry?
yeah, mimicry, which is what I was just saying.
Write
Mimicry is
write it. Write text me about this words mimicry.
so
Mm.
mimicry. hmm So it's just when you're repeating what has been said or
Oh,
you're
yes,
repeating an action.
yes.
So in this
Uh,
situation,
do you think I sometimes I get a new idea about to learn English? To watch the video in English language and repeat after them when read when speak the sentence or phrases, and sometimes it's write it. Is that a correct idea to learn English fast?
I think it's a good suggestion if you're trying
Hmm.
to, one, get used to speaking English. So if
Hmm.
you're wanting to speak English at a faster pace and you want to get used to using that kind of a pace in conversations, mimicry is a great way to do that. But it also can get you more exposed to slang. It can get you exposed to different cultures as well. So it gives you a little bit of an opportunity to get some exposure to.
Okay. How long does it take time to learn English for the person or people who they are not to speak English?
It
6 months is enough if
it very
am I if am I their selves with English language.
It varies. Everybody's different. So it's
Mm,
going to vary on how dedicated you are to learning. Are you doing something every day for maybe hours at a time? Are
mm,
you doing multiple classes a week? What it would depend on how dedicated and how proactive you are in learning. And
mm,
then on top of that, also what you're doing in classes too can be really important as well. So like when you're meeting with a teacher, the questions that you might not be able to answer or have answered when you're not in class is a great time to ask that teacher or that tutor the questions. Because if you have questions regarding grammar, sentence structure, maybe you have a question about a slang word that was used in conversation that you were watching or hearing, then this is an opportunity for you to get those answers to kind of clarify. So, like, as you're learning, even if it's outside of the classroom, you always have someone to reference when it comes to any information that you have questions on. So if you're someone who's more dedicated, has the time to really put effort into getting better, I mean, 6 months, if you're coming from no experience at all, that's kind of pushing it because there's a lot to English in general, and it's not just speaking. If you're wanting to be able to write, read, and listen also as well, because listening is a huge part
The
of conversation too.
That's mean it depends on the person how to use the English language with the 3 months or 6 months. That's mean to when he uses the English practice. That's mean to less time. Maybe it's to be 6 months or 5 months, right?
If they're not practicing that often, generally it takes people a couple years.
Oh,
Mo Most of my students, it takes them years to fully encapsulate the English language because
mm.
a lot of them are not as proactive. They don't have the time to be. I mean, they do what they can outside of the classroom, but outside of that, they don't have a lot of free time to practice. So even though they might be exposed to music, movies, or TV, they don't have enough time to be proactive in learning. So, but many of my other students that I do have, they already know English or know it to an extent, but they've been practicing it for years. So English is not one of those classes or one of those languages that you can just learn in a very short period of time, especially if you have other things going on. You it's a task and it's not easy. I mean, as an English learner, it took me over, on average with English classes, it took me over 15, 16 years to fully learn, what we have in English. Yeah,
but that a long time.
it's a very long time because there's a lot to English. There's a lot of vocabulary, there's a lot of grammar, there's a lot of information. And, especially if you're coming in and you've only been doing it for so long, if you've only been doing it for a couple of months, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot to English. And um, even with consistent practice, it's still going to take a while. It's going to at least take a year.
Okay. What about the speaking with myself and record my voice, and after that to repeat and repeat that recorder to find the mistakes, or listen to my voice about my English and how to pronounce these words.
So you can do that if you feel that's going to assist you and help you in
Mm,
learning.
mm,
However, I know of other students that it did that and it actually made it worse because one, all you're hearing is how you say it compared
mm,
to nothing else, just how you're pronouncing it. So sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference because you're used to hearing how you pronounce it. And if you're just listening to the recording of yourself, you may not pick up what it is that might be incorrect. So it can make it a little bit harder because you're just referencing yourself when it comes to the speaking. So unless you're hearing somebody else saying the same phrases and then you're comparing that, I mean that's the only way you might get more accuracy. So let's say for example, like I mentioned, mimicking a TV show or mimicking a movie. Maybe
mm,
something that you could do instead is listen to a line in a movie,
mm.
then pause, say the line, and then go back and play that line again, listen to it, and then listen to yourself after listening to that line. So you can get a reference on pronunciation, how the words are pronounced, the sound that they make, compared to what you're using when you're talking. Because that can give you a little bit more reference to more proper pronunciation.
Okay. Can I say secretary of manager?
Who?
Secretary of manager?
Secretariat?
Secretary of manager?
Secretariat, a manager? What's that?
Yes. That's mean the person to help the boss or manager with the works.
Like an assistant manager?
Assistant manager. Yes, we can say assistant manager, but I get something in my mind to be.
Mhm.
We can say secretary of manager, or it's wrong.
No, no, we don't
Mm.
say that. Just assistant
Assistant manager,
manager. Hmm.
assistant manager.
Yep.
Okay, okay. Tell me about your schedule. I think your schedule is too busy. It's difficult to find your this time. I book
Hmm.
this lesson before, I think before 4 years, 4 days ago. What
Hmm.
about the December? Do you have free time in your schedule?
So I don't have anything for December currently because I don't know what my schedule is going to be like.
Oh,
Um,
it's
currently have
uh,
currently have a very busy schedule. Today just happened to be a day because it's a holiday, so I had time
mm.
off, and so I ended up just opening up a couple hours. But my schedule, I do not have any consistency with it right now. So if you're needing somebody who has consistency, that would not be me.
Oh, that's bad news
Yeah, I'm
for
sorry.
me. For me. What
Mm-mm.
about the next year? Next year
I
in
I
January.
I have no idea what my schedule will look like next year. I'm probably going to be tutoring less, if I'm honest, because I'm going back to school as well. So I'm going to be very
Mm.
busy.
Uh,
Yeah.
Back to school, study at school, or teaching
Uh,
at school.
no, I'm going to be going back to school as a student.
Mm. Because you are teaching in at school.
No, I'm not currently teaching at a school.
Mm.
I do teach currently online, but I am also
Mm.
working in banking. So
Mm.
I, yep. So I'm doing that full time, and I'm also teaching classes full time. But my schedule as of late has I've been condensing it because I have no time to sleep. So I with the time that I have available, I do tend to be booked. So unfortunately, when I'm working on here, my hours are very limited just because of the fact that I'm busy in other places. Um, so yeah, my schedule is going to be very limited going into the next year. Like I'm cutting down on my teaching as well.
Anyway, okay. Anyway, do you have any website to help me because to practice about English?
Mhm. Um, Specifically, I don't have any personal website suggestions just because I don't normally use any other websites.
Mm.
Um, I mean, of course, you can always reference YouTube. That's always a great suggestion when it comes to English learning. If you need to reference it for like grammar or if you're wanting to hear people talk, that's always a great way to do that. Um, I always reference people to music as well. There's two artists specifically. I think how they have really crystal clear pronunciation when it comes to speaking and also singing. So I always reference them if you're going to learn through music as well, but also movie suggestions too. I have that as well for students too, if you're wanting to learn in that capacity. Like I was mentioning, like mimicry, and then you mentioned about recording yourself after you say something to listen to how you sound. Um, you could always do a mixture of mimicry and then also the recording too to work on pronunciation to make sure the sounds are accurate.
What about the Cambridge plane to learn English? SEFR
I've
or
never used them
CE?
before.
This
Stuffer?
C. Yes.
Yeah, if it's a website, I've never used it. I've not used anything
Mm.
for Cambridge, so
Mm.
I couldn't necessarily say if it's good or bad, but I know Cambridge is very good when it comes to education, so I wouldn't doubt that their
Mm.
information is probably
Oh,
very good
but by the way, where did you study English?
in the United States.
Absolutely, I know that, but I ask you about the college.
Yes, my college, like my degree is
Yes.
in business.
Nice.
Yep.
Uh,
So my certification to teach English is through
yes.
an international academy.
Which college
So
or university?
it's through international is it ITA, so International TEFL Academy. That's the name of it.
Okay.
So it's not through a
Uh,
college. It's through an academy.
hmm. Do you think it's academy and different about the college or same thing?
Like the education or
About about the naming about the academy and college, same thing. You can if I
they're
search my
they're d- they're different organizations. So an
ah
academy is not college. It's not accredited. So it's
mm,
it's entirely different. So it's like an international, like the place I went through is an accreditation, or it's a certification for you to teach English to foreigners,
mm.
but it's not like a degree, because you generally would already have a degree prior to getting your certification.
Uh, what about the listening? I sometimes to browse the internet and on YouTube to browse, and not I not listen to a specific video. Every video speak English, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, British, American. I listened. Do you think that's useful, or should I listen to a specific accent?
I would say whichever ones that you hear more common.
Hmm.
So if you are used to hearing American accents, or if you're used to hearing British accents, I would recommend to listen to those, whichever ones you hear more commonly or you're more
Hmm.
exposed to. I would just recommend those at the moment, just because those are going to be the ones you'll want to focus on, especially if you interact with people from those countries. You'll benefit more from focusing on that than you would if you focused all around. And then eventually, if you do decide that you want to kind of see what the difference is between the other accents when it comes to like Australia, New Zealand, because the United States and Canada, they're very similar. So there's not really that much of a difference. Um, and then, of course, you have Britain, so they have their own accent too. Um,
Uh,
but those are, I guess, the United States or American accent, because we have Canada as well, and then also the British accent are the more common ones. So if you
yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
would say if you interact with more people from those countries, then that might be better to just focus on those first. And then eventually, if you would like to explore or go branch out a little bit more to other countries and the accents too, then of course feel free to do so.
But I think you should every learning to listen and practice, listen all over the accent, because you maybe to speak with so many people around over the world, from Canada or Australia, British,
Mhm.
Egyptian, Iraqi. You should to listen to the every to listen all the accent, right?
I mean, but if you're in the process of learning a new language, you shouldn't overwhelm yourself. You should just mainly focus on the ones that you're going to hear most commonly used, and then eventually branch out. Because when you're learning English, like as an English person who's learned English, you only listen to one language. You only listen to one accent, and then you
Mm.
branch out from there.
You should focus on one accent, but you listen to
Mhm.
more different accent, right?
Eventually, yes. But when you're first
Yes,
learning,
it's nice word.
you focus on one.
Yeah, it's nice word to be say eventually. Yes, uh, I forget to what you ask you. Anyway, unfortunately, I forget. It's a slip from my mind.
Oh no.
Okay, because my mind it's very. Uh, okay, anyway. Uh, I don't. Let me remember. I think. Okay. What about the jokes? Jokes, English jokes. It's useful to learn English because you to
English
understand.
jokes?
Yes,
English jokes?
yes, English jokes
I
or
mean,
jokes in English.
it can be, I mean, I guess it could sometimes be like relevant to learning, but
Mm,
I don't know if I would necessarily reference that as a way to learn, just
mm.
because it might not make sense because a lot of times jokes are more regional. It might make more sense to some people than it would others.
Uh, there's a book like 4,000 words essential for the other poll. That's mean explain the words and explain the words with the definition. And this book is contained 32 units. Do you think that's useful books to improve my English language?
If they have words that they think are words that you should know, then of course you could always use something like that.
Uh,
Hopefully they'll have references towards sentences that you can use those words for and explain that as well. I know
mm.
that on average they say you should know in between about 10 to 12,000 words.
Okay, I talk with you about 25 or 6 minutes, right? If you
Mhm.
want to ask you about assess my English, my vocabulary and my sentence pronunciation, which mark do you give me? B1, B2, good, bad, intermediate?
I would say if we're going based off of today, I would say you're between a B1 and a B2. I
Mm,
think the one thing that's important is you might want to slow down just a little
mm,
bit because
yes,
sometimes
that's right.
it can be yeah, because sometimes it seems
Uh,
like you just go a little too quick because you're trying to get
mm,
across what you want to say, but it can be hard to
uh,
understand.
do you understand me clearly when I speak with you?
Hmm. I do.
Okay. Do you recommended me about book to I read to improve my English language, like stories
Mm,
or?
I guess it just depends because like I'm not a huge book reader, so
Mm,
I don't necessarily have any specific books in mind. I guess if depending on the genre of book that you'd like, um I can maybe give you some recommendations on writers and then you can kind of choose a book from there. Um if you like thriller like books, then James Patterson's really good. Stephen King was also really great. If you're wanting something that's um, a little more like thought, like there's just a lot of thought to what's being written. Neil Gaiman's also very good. There's a book that he wrote called American Gods. It's actually very interesting. It's very thought-provoking. And it talks about the older gods versus the new day and age of what we've made into idolism. So it's very interesting thought processes compared to most people. Um, Trying to think what other books or authors
what about the stories? Do you think his stories is useful? Short stories.
like reading.
Reading, yes.
I think reading can be helpful. If anything, it can at least give you an idea about like story patterns, also like spacing and use of grammar within stories. So you can get an idea of, conversation and like the patterns in conversation. I
Mm.
think the one thing that's really
Uh,
important,
mm. I think motivate the conversation stories.
it can, yeah. I mean, it gives you a
Mm.
conversational topic too.
Uh, okay, thank you very much. Have a good day.
Oh, you're welcome. You
It's time
too.
up. Me too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.